Hello, dear students. This is our fourth class in the course of English literary texts. So far, we have done 3 poems. Now, this time we are doing something different. As you can see on the screen, we are doing Macbeth, or rather, just a very short part from Macbeth, which is a play by William Shakespeare. And of course, you have all heard about William Shakespeare. So let's begin with a few things about the play itself. Of course, you know the word play means مسرحية. Now, Macbeth is a tragedy. In drama, we have tragedy, comedy, and tragicomedy. So Macbeth belongs to the genre of tragedies. What does a tragedy mean? Now, a tragedy, of course, is always based on dark themes, and they portray and deal with serious subjects, serious topics like death, disaster, and human suffering, but not in the way that you might be thinking of now. We're not speaking about naked, no. This human suffering is portrayed in a very dignified way. And also, the story is always thought-provoking. That is, it encourages us, whether we are the audience or the readers, to think of other things. Okay, so a tragedy is not meant to make us cry, as you can imagine. No, it's just a portrayal of human suffering, and it intends to make us think more. Of course, there are never happy endings, and the characters in tragedies are always often burdened by certain flaws. The main characters in tragedies are always burdened by tragic flaws. Now, a flaw means a mistake. And this flaw, this mistake, usually lead to their demise, to their defeat, to their death. So the main characters in tragedies, in the tragedy, usually we have 1 or 2 main characters. This character is always burdened by a tragic flaw. So Macbeth as a play is a tragedy. This is something very brief about William Shakespeare, because of course, if we talk about Shakespeare, we can talk forever. However, he was born 1564 and he died 1616. He was an English playwright, and please focus on the way we write the word playwright. Playwright is the person who writes plays, so we just call him playwright. He was also a poet, and he was an actor. He used to act in his own plays. He is regarded as the greatest writer in the English language, and actually one of the world's greatest dramatists. Shakespeare produced most of his known works between 1589 and 1613. That was the era when he was really a prolific writer. His very early plays were mainly comedies and histories, and they were actually regarded as the best in the genre. So he wrote the best historical plays and the best comedies. After that, he started writing tragedies until 1608. Among the very famous tragedies Shakespeare wrote are Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, Othello, which is called in Arabic Otil, King Lear, you know King Lear. It has been performed on the National Theatre in Cairo, المسرح القومي الملك لير, and Macbeth. And all these are considered to be among the finest works in the English language. So this is a very brief thing about Shakespeare, and of course you can always know more if you consult Google. This is the passage we are doing from Macbeth. It's taken from Act 5, فصل الخامس, Scene 5, المشهد الخامس. Usually, Shakespeare wrote his plays in 5 acts, 5 فصول, and each act is divided into several scenes. Let's read this passage. Re-enter Satan, this is the servant. Macbeth asks, "Wherefore was that cry?" Satan says, "The queen, my lord, is dead." Macbeth, "She should have died hereafter. There would have been a time for such a word. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day, to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. Life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing." This is a whole passage spoken only by Macbeth, the main protagonist, the main character in the play. The fact that this is Act 5 means it's almost the end. Let's have a very brief idea about the whole play. What is it about? Now, a brave Scottish general called Macbeth receives a prophecy, nubu'ah, from a trio of witches, الساحرات الثلاثة. What was this prophecy about? That one day he will become King of Scotland. Consumed by ambition, he's very ambitious, and pushed to action by his wife, Macbeth couldn't wait. So he murders King Duncan, this is King of Scotland, and takes the Scottish throne for himself. Of course, when this happened, he is full of a sense of guilt and paranoia, because notice he is already a brave, noble Scottish general. And after killing King Duncan, he was forced to commit more and more murders to protect himself from enmity, العداوة, and suspicion. Soon he became a tyrannical ruler. And of course, this is a bloodbath, حمام دم. And later there was a civil war. All these disasters take Macbeth and his wife, who is known as Lady Macbeth, who became, of course, the queen. This take both of them into the realms of madness and death. And as you can see, this passage begins with, "The queen, my lord, is dead." Who is a tragic hero? What does that mean? Now, a tragic hero is a type of character in a tragedy and is usually the protagonist, the main character. So a tragedy has the tragic hero. Tragic hero usually have heroic traits, very good characteristics that earn them the sympathy of the audience. Because they are very good, we sympathize with them. But they also have flaws, mistakes that lead to their own downfall and demise. This is the definition of a tragic hero. A very good person with very good qualities, but he has one flaw in his character that leads to his end. That's why we call this flaw, this mistake, tragic flaw. For example, in Romeo and Juliet, Romeo is, of course, the tragic hero. What is his tragic flaw? His reckless passion in love. He's very rash when it comes to love, مندفع في الحب. And this has led to the tragedy of his death. The idea of the tragic hero, البطل التراجيدي, was first defined by the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle. Because when he studied all the Greek drama, he realized that there is always a tragic hero in tragedies, and this is the definition of a tragic hero. He's usually a very good, noble person, but he has one mistake in his character that leads to his downfall. Of course, Macbeth is one of those plays that has been performed on stage, al masrah, 100 times. So all those photos that you see are from these plays. Okay. How could Macbeth, the protagonist, the character, how could Macbeth be a tragic hero? Now, his fatal flaw, his tragic flaw, is his over ambition unchecked ambition, his desire for power and position. He wanted very much to be the king. And that was for him more important than anything else in life. He's willing to give up everything that he has in order to possess the crown. And he did that. He killed King Duncan, the King of Scotland. Now, according to the Webster's dictionary, a tragic flaw is defined as a flaw in character that brings about the downfall of the hero of a tragedy. This is the definition of a tragic flaw in the Webster dictionary. Macbeth held within his character the flaw of ambition. That was part of his personality. And of course, there is moral weakness, because what he did was wrong. He shouldn't have killed the King of Scotland. And all these mistakes contributed to his death and downfall. In other words, Macbeth is the tragic hero of the play Macbeth because he fits the following criteria. 1, he is of noble birth. He is morally good at the start, at the very beginning. 3, he has a tragic flaw, and this is his over-ambition. 4, his actions affect the entire kingdom. Of course, when we have a civil war, so we're talking about the entire kingdom. 5, he understands the consequences of his actions, and his actions lead to his death. He understands the consequences, but he could not control himself. It's the mistake. It's the mistake. This is what we call the tragic flaw. So Macbeth is a tragic hero with a tragic flaw. What about this passage we have been reading? The passage we are supposed to analyze. So in light of all what we have said, Macbeth is a tragic hero who is reciting his final soliloquy. Oh my God. So we understood tragic hero and we understood tragedy. What is the meaning of soliloquy? What is that? Soliloquy. Soliloquy is a passage in a play in which a character expresses his thoughts or feelings aloud, بصوت عالي, while alone upon the stage. He's alone on the stage, or if there is somebody, so this person cannot hear what the character is saying. Okay, who hears this? We, the audience, only. So it's the character speaking aloud to himself about his own thoughts or feelings. Soliloquy is a device, أداة. Device means أداة, that has been an accepted dramatic convention, تقليد درامي. It has always been there, especially in the theater of 16th century, 17th, and 18th. A soliloquy, what's the use of it? It allows the character to express his or her views without having anyone to talk to. So we, the audience, we benefit from this because we hear this soliloquy, we hear it, and we understand more about the characters. Please remember that a soliloquy is not a monologue. There is a difference between the two. A soliloquy, the protagonist, the character in the play, is speaking to himself or herself. A monologue, there are two persons. It's just one person is speaking for a long time, but there is another person who can hear this. A soliloquy, we only hear it, we the audience or the readers. And this gives the audience an extended look at what the character is thinking and feeling. It reveals more about the character. We understand the mindset of this character. Now, this is a link. If you follow the link, it's very interesting because I told you that Macbeth as a play has been performed several times on stage, and it was also turned into films. So this link will take you to a video that gives you all the actors who who performed Macbeth. But are we talking about the whole play? No. This particular passage we are going to analyze. So from Orson Welles until Michael Fassbender, see, you will see them all reciting this soliloquy. This is very interesting because you can understand the feelings more and you can see how each actor presented Macbeth in a different way. Now let's start analyzing that passage. She should have died hereafter. There would have been a time for such a word. Now, these lines or this soliloquy are delivered, are recited by Macbeth as a response to the news of his wife's death. This is what the servant told him. The queen, my lord, is dead. Apparently, Macbeth is a little bit indifferent to the news of her death. Indifferent, لا مبالي. Because all the things that have happened before in his life and his very near doom, نهايته الوشيكة, made him think life is meaningless. So he said she should have died hereafter. كده ولا كده كانت هتموت. Or there could be another meaning. كان ممكن تستنى شوي. There would have been a time for such a word. She was going to die. Then comes the very famous line. This is a very famous line. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. This is a very famous line to the extent that sometimes this is called the tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow soliloquy. So tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow what? Because there is a comma, creeps in this petty pace from day to day. Pace means rhythm, إيقاع. Pretty, بائس. Creeps in, يتسلل, from day to day. So he feels life to creep in at a very slow pace, day after day. And this is, of course, boring. Or we can say monotonous. Until when? Until the end, to the last syllable of recorded time. حتى نهاية الزمان. So tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day till the end of time, to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. So not only tomorrow, we have also yesterdays. The past, all the yesterdays are just lighted fools, حمقى, who lead the way to dusty death. So we have here two opposites, okay, tomorrow and yesterdays. Also, please notice the repetition of the word tomorrow. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. This reveals or expresses the growing madness of Macbeth. Out, out, brief candle. Life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. Out, out, brief candle. He's comparing life to a candle, shama. And it's very brief. So here, when he says out, out, he's extinguishing the candle. بيطفي الشمعة. Out, out, brief candle. So he compares life to a brief candle. He wants to put out this short life. Life is but a walking shadow. Now, again, this is another metaphor, comparing life to a walking shadow. A poor player, ممثل بائس. مش فقير، لا، فقير في المواهب، ممثل رديء. Life is but a walking shadow. A poor player who does what? Who struts and frets his hour upon the stage. He acts very badly. He acts very badly, and he just spends a few hours on stage. And then he is heard no more. And then he disappears at the end of the play. He disappears, and he will not be heard again. So all this is what we call an extended metaphor, استعارة ممتدة. Life is but a walking shadow. A poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. This is all an extended metaphor, which refers to life as just a poor player who is nothing but a walking shadow, because he's very poor. He's a very bad player. So you can't even see him on stage. He's just a walking shadow. So this is an extended metaphor, and we need to know the significance of this metaphor, how he views life now. It tells us something about his mind. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. We need to understand it refers to what? See, that was the beginning. Life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale, so it refers to life. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Now, these are the concluding lines of the soliloquy. And Macbeth compares life to a story told, tale means story, of course, told by an idiot, ahmaq, full of sound and fury like noise and anger, wrath. And at the end, all this means nothing, has no meaning. Of course, because this is the final soliloquy in the play, so these lines refers to Macbeth's past, where he and his wife devised a plot to kill King Duncan. Now all of their acts have become meaningless. Comparing the tale that signifies nothing to life, Macbeth realizes that all the bloodshed have come to signify nothing. All the killings he did just mean nothing now. So what is Macbeth's perspective of life through this soliloquy? Because when you analyze a passage, actually, you don't have to read the whole text. This is the whole idea. We need to appreciate this soliloquy. Now, in this famous speech of Macbeth, the tomorrow speech, the final soliloquy, Macbeth discusses the futility of life. He sees life as a shadow, meaningless, empty. Every tomorrow just creeps by at a very slow rhythm without any differences to other days. That's why we called it monotonous, boring. After his wife's death, which we learned at the very beginning, time for Macbeth seems to be intolerable burden, عبء غير محتمل. And the future looks like a force that is going to lead him to his end. So time for him is just an intolerable burden, the tomorrow and all the yesterdays. Lady Macbeth used to be his supporter and his driving force. At the end, she lost her mind and then she died. Whether she committed suicide or she died, we don't know and we don't care. Macbeth realized that his ending, his doom is very close. And this makes him indifferent to her death. All this is what made him indifferent towards her death. What about our sympathy? Do we sympathize with Macbeth? Now, the famous words tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow exemplify, of course, the very effective use of repetition. A good writer knows when to use repetition, because this repetition enhances, supports, clarifies, augments the theme of the passage. The rest of the tomorrow soliloquy is about, as we have just said, how futile, repetitive, and hopeless and desperate life seems to Macbeth. So he began the soliloquy with a hopeless type of repetition, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, to clarify Macbeth's feeling of despair. The repetition enhances the theme and clarifies or highlights Macbeth's feeling of despair. Well, it is actually in this scene, in this final soliloquy, perhaps than in any other part of the play, that we sympathize, we the audience sympathize with Macbeth. He's left by his followers. He's waiting for the attack of his enemies instead of going to meet them. He is completely immersed, plunged into his misery by the news of his wife's sudden death. So we sympathize with him. We do not agree of his actions. We sympathize with this tragic hero because we know that he was initially a very good man, only at the start, but he has this mistake. Of course, you can notice that there is nothing said here about Lady Macbeth, how she died or what happened. We just hear the cries of the women, and this is what made Macbeth ask at the beginning, where do these cries come from? Shakespeare at this point is not concerned about Lady Macbeth. He wants to concentrate on the hero of the drama. He wants us to focus on Macbeth. It's not the manner of Lady Macbeth's death, but the way in which it affects her husband. And Shakespeare wants us to notice that. So this soliloquy, remember, it was said as a response to the news of Lady Macbeth's death. So we don't care how she died. We care about something else, how this death affected her husband. Themes of this passage, it's of course death and the futility of life, the meaninglessness of life. And these are the major themes in this soliloquy. Macbeth keeps thinking of death. He's indifferent to the news. And he calls death as the last act of a bad play. It is a tale told by an idiot. For Macbeth, life seems to be devoid of meaning. Devoid of is the opposite of full of. خالية من المعنى. Exactly like an idiot's story. If an idiot tells a story, then it is meaningless. What about the tone? The tone is very important when it comes to literature. What is the tone of Macbeth in this soliloquy? Of course, The queen is dead, and Macbeth is left to contemplate a lonely, boring, meaningless future of endless tomorrows, signifying nothing. So if this is what he's actually saying, how do you expect the tone to be? The tone is resigned, فيها استسلام, almost wistful, occasioned not only by the death of the wife, but also by Macbeth's entire loss of purpose. So the tone is resigned and desperate. Resigned and desperate. This is the tone. What's exactly tone? Tone نبرة الكلام, نبرة النفسية طبعا, which is very close to what is the attitude of Macbeth. إيه موقفه؟ ده الموقف. Okay, let's come to one of the most important parts, imagery as a figure of speech. But let's define imagery and figure of speech. Let's begin from the end. What's the meaning of a figure of speech? What's the meaning of that? Well, the meaning in Arabic is تعبير مجازي, مجاز. A figure of speech is a word or a phrase that is used in a non-literal way. Non-literal, بشكل غير حرفي. To do what? To create an effect. خلق تأثير. This effect could be rhetorical, something that has to do with the language. As, for example, when the poet arranges his words in a certain way to achieve something poetic. So it could be rhetorical or imagery, as in the use of language to suggest a visual picture or make an idea more vivid. Overall, figures of speech function as literary devices. Now, literary devices means وسائل أدبية. المجاز هو وسيلة أدبية. الصورة وسيلة أدبية. الاستعارة وسيلة أدبية. So figures of speech are always used in literature because of their expressive use of language. So whenever a word or a phrase is used in a non-literal way to create effect, this is what we call a figure of speech. And there are kinds. There is a personification, there is a metaphor, there is a simile. These are all figures of speech. Figures of speech كلهم كده على بعضهم, these are literary devices. And I hope now I have answered your question about that. So imagery is صور والتخيل. Imagery consists of descriptive language that can function as a way for the reader to better imagine the world. That's why writers use imagery. And of course, imagery adds symbolism to the work. Usually, imagery draws on the five senses: the taste, touch, sight, smell, and sound. And of course, there are other kinds of images. There are mental images, as you can see in the middle, mental images. Imagery helps the reader to visualize more realistically the author's writings. Metaphors, allusions, إشارات, descriptive words and similars. All these help to awaken the reader's perception. And these are all what we call imagery and figures of speech. So you can say imagery or figures of speech. So now that we understand the meaning of figures of speech, we need to see what we have in this passage. Now, do imagery add anything at all to any writing? This is important. In this final soliloquy, the imagery helped us as readers to uncover, to reveal the tragedy of Macbeth. What was he saying? Here is what was he saying. Our days on this earth serve no purpose other than pushing us towards our dusty death. Life seems to be an endless and depressing succession متتالية of bleak days that creep in along a slow, boring pace. Time on this earth, in this life, is so unsubstantial that it can only be compared to a walking shadow. Our time on this earth is so unreal that it can only be compared to a stage on which a bad actor is trying to remember his role. When the play is over, the character of this bad actor will disappear into nothingness and will leave nothing significant behind him, signifying nothing. Now, to make things easier for you, you know, cultures borrow from each other. And actually, the excellent actor and director Yusuf Bek Wahbi had borrowed this idea a long time ago from Shakespeare when he said, وَمَا الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَسْرَحٌ كَبِيرٌ. So this is the idea. This is the whole idea, dunya masrah, but then Shakespeare, of course, has the other details that we are just bad actors on stage. Of course, Macbeth is referring to himself. Let's look at the imagery in this passage. Life, which is so short, is presented in the image of the candle that produces light for a very brief time. Out, brief candle. So this is, life is compared to a candle, and this signifies the shortness of life. Life is also compared to a walking shadow produced by the light of the candle. And of course, if we put out the candle, if we extinguish the candle, لو طفينا الشمعة, this shadow disappears. Similarly, people die when time or death comes. The walking shadow also is the image of the man who is acting on the stage. And he just leaves stage when he finishes his role. Similarly, people will die when the role in this play, which is life, is played off, is done. The picture of life as a bad play written by a fool, it is a tale told by an idiot, and lighted fools and acted by a bad actor signifies that there is no meaning. So all these images signify that there is an end to this life. Life is just a bad play written by a fool. And of course, this is what Macbeth is having on his mind, because he's referring to all his actions. The images also of bad play, sound and fury, shadow produced by candle, heighten the speaker's emotions. All these images heighten and highlight the emotions of Macbeth and elaborate more on the themes of the play, despite its shortness. So you see, all the images go into one direction. Time creeps in a petty pace. It's a tale told by an idiot. We're all going to dusty death. And in all these, remember the repetition of tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. I advise you very much, I recommend this link. I recommend this link very much. You will enjoy it. It's all in all, it's not more than 10 minutes or something, because you will be hearing the tone of tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. This is the final soliloquy in the play Macbeth. Macbeth is a tragic hero. His flaw was his unchecked ambition, his greed for power, and that was taken from Act 5, Scene 5. So you have seen how a tragedy is built. This is what we need to pay attention to. The elements of a Shakespearean tragedy. We have a tragic hero, we have the tragic flaw, and usually we have soliloquies. And we learned how to appreciate this very famous soliloquy. It's even known as the tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow soliloquy. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this. Next time, we need to look at a very short story, and that will be by Jamaica Kincaid, and it's called Girl. Thank you very much. And in case you do have any questions, please do not hesitate to post them.